You know, anime today is almost guaranteed to get a second season. But what about the ones who don't get that? Should you watch them? Do they deserve a second season? Well, that's what we're going to discuss on One Season Runs. This episode being No Game, No Life.
I'm a god, but I'm still placing God do. I know niggas know dogs, sell dog food. No my game on point, no hard food. No, these niggas set on fire, so I told them get fist, cause these niggas too old, too broke.
Alright, so this is going to be the second episode to One Season Runs. And yeah, it's going to be No Game, No Life. So this was actually a request from a commenter. So yeah, I'm going to do requests for this kind of series. And basically, what the premise is that I'm going to review animes that only have one season. And I'm basically going to discuss what I like about it, what I don't like about it, if you should watch it or not, and if it deserves a second season. So I guess in this one, this might be controversial in some ways because this anime is very popular and very well loved, even though it only has one season. So I'll go over what's it about, and then I'll say what I like about it. Or I guess I'll say what I don't like about it first, and then I'll say what I like about it. So what's the premise of this kind of story? So No Game No Life is actually an isekai anime. Alright, so you might be, not like it off the bat just because it's isekai and it's very saturated at the moment. But it is a isekai that isn't your typical kind of thing, or your typical kind of isekai, because it doesn't really focus on fighting. In fact, it focuses mostly on gambling, and that's kind of the main kind of focus of the story. So I'll tell you my kind of history with this show first, I guess. So I discovered No Game No Life about maybe last year, around like almost exactly a year ago. And at the time, I was really into isekais because I don't know why, I was just really into them. Overlord just came out, or the third season, and Shield Hero came out as well, and I was just really into the genre at the time. So actually I think I discovered it 2 years prior, I think. Or no, it was a little bit more than a year ago. So yeah, I was really into the idea of this kind of fantasy world and going to a different world and things like that. So when I watched the first episode of No Game No Life, since it was very recommended, I just really didn't like it at the time. I was like, what? This isn't what an isekai is supposed to be like. Isekai is supposed to be really fantasy-like and, have to do with magic and fighting. But I couldn't appreciate the type of story that I was trying to go for and the kind of premise, right? That is until I watched another anime called Kuroguri, which is basically about this transfer student that goes to this high school, it's a high school for very rich, the rich population of Japan, where the kids go, and basically they learn the art of business through gambling and things like that. So after I watched this, I could appreciate the kind of anime better, because at the time I just couldn't see myself watching an anime just about gambling, because I thought there'd be no real good stakes and things like that, which I was wrong. I could admit that I was wrong about the kind of idea, right? So I didn't really go back to this anime until recently, until I got the suggestion, because I just forgot about it. And yeah, so let's go back on topic, right, on what's it about. So it's an isekai. It's about these two kind of shut-ins, being Shiro and Sora. Sora being the guy and Shiro being the girl. And basically they are top tier gamers and things like that. So they basically both play video games together, and they have this avatar called Blank, right? So that's the kind of premise. And then one day they get challenged to a game of chess online, and they basically win. The person that they were going against was this god of this one world called Discord, I think it's called. And yeah, basically he transfers them to that kind of world where all they do is gamble, right? Because he's the only god that's left after a huge war, and he was the god of games or something like that. So Sora and Shiro basically gamble their way until they become the kings of the human faction called Humanity, and their basic idea is to basically get enough of basically take over the world so that they could play against the god again. So that's kind of the main focus, and the entire story is them kind of going and getting more and more people on his side so that he could challenge God later on. So let's talk about things I like about this series, right? I really like the art style, right? The art style can put people off because it is very bright and very colorful, right? But I really like it. I like it when art uses a different color than black as the outlines, which this anime does. They use a kind of red or a darker red, the same color as the male lead's hair and things like that. And I really like this kind of trope that they use in a lot of isekais, where they use modern kind of they use their kind of modern science or the knowledge of science and apply it to the fantasy world to get an advantage. You see this in the way that Shiro and Sora bet, right? And how they actually do a lot of the things, like the kind of game against the kind of game for the library. I forgot the race of the girl who owns the library, or I forgot her name, but basically she is there's like 16 different races and she's part of like a really high standing race. So, and it was basically a word game, right? So basically every time they said a word, and if that object was not there, then it would appear, and if it was there, it would disappear. And the way that they were able to win was that they basically were able to remove some laws of physics towards the end and basically recreate the Big Bang strong enough to kill this almost immortal being that they were going against. So that's how they win. They use their knowledge of real world science to get an advantage, since they don't know, since the people in their world doesn't really know anything about their interpretation of science. So yeah, and there's also this kind of idea of humanity being the weakest and using that to their advantage, since all the other races are going to be egotistical and things like that. So I really like that trope. I really like the underdogs coming up on top. But yeah, let's get into things I don't like. And the kind of thing I don't like is that the main characters are kind of Mary Sue's in the way that they're like, oh, they're so smart that they're like smarter than everyone in the world, and blank never loses and things like that, right? That's kind of annoying, but then they kind of make up for it for parts where like they're shut in kind of part of themselves show out, and they're scared when they're separated and things like that, because they're not really used to going outside and things like that. So another thing I don't like is the author basically set up this story to be where the characters can't lose, right? Because if they lost in any part, if they lost at any part of the series, they would not be able to continue the story. And this kind of makes it where there aren't really too much stakes involved, right? It makes it where, like, you can't really, like, if you know the tropes, you can't really get invested too much, because you always know that the main characters are going to win no matter what, right? So the only way you get entertainment out of this is knowing how they do it, right? So let me give you an example, right? The kind of last battle, right? They could have not, there was no way that the main characters were going to lose. If they would have lost, they would have lost their basic race piece. And yeah, this is a spoiler, right? So this, so if they would have lost, they would have lost their race piece and basically not be able to be considered a person anymore. They'd be considered like things like animals or slaves. So you obviously know that the main character is gonna win no matter what. So yeah, that's kind of a thing that kind of bums me out about this, because they made it up where they can't lose. And something like Kataguri, where yeah, there is very high stakes, but you could always bounce back from losses if you play it right, which you can't do in No Game No Life, because if you lost, it's basically the end of the series. But what I also don't like about it is the kind of final match, right, where Shiro and Sora were going against the kind of Beastman girl, and they basically lost, right? They got shot by the gun, which made them get out, and then after that was done, the Beast Girl lets her guard down and actually gets shot by Steph, which is the kind of girl that they meet in like the first episode. And basically it was all calculated, I guess. At least that's what the main characters say. It was all calculated, and they did this by seeing where the NPC would drag Steph, and they used the pledges, which is a big part of the series, to basically force her to shoot at this certain time, right? And I really don't like that. And the reason why is that there was always this kind of idea of chance in the story, and talking about how chance doesn't exist and that the game is already decided before you even play. But if they would have done this and make it where the Steph actually shot her by accident, I think this would have challenged the main characters about things about like chance, right? And how it could have actually involved chance could be more involved than they may think, right? And I could have appreciated that a little bit more than just having it where, oh, they predicted where the NPC was going to be, and they used that to basically trap the girl at a certain point. Because, you know, that's just like, you're kind of stretching my disbelief, right, at that point. So that's kind of a major problem with the series, is that you can't lose, right? And they always have to make it where like, oh, it was actually part of the main character's plan all along, you know? And sometimes it's cool, it's really cool to see like the main characters actually outsmart someone when it's justified, but something like this is kind of a stretch in my opinion, right? But you know, other people might like it, like, wow, he was able to predict where the NPC was going to be, and he made her, you know, take a bet so that he could use the pledges on her, and you know, make her shoot so that the girl wouldn't notice her intent when she was unconscious and things like that. You know, some people might enjoy that, but like in my personal opinion, I think that was kind of a stretch, like I said. So yeah, and the series kind of, or the season 1 kind of ends with basically him absorbing, or Sora basically absorbing the Beastmen's territory into humanity, which is the humans, and basically becoming a bigger country, and basically going over, or they're going to try to conquer the elves next, I guess. So yeah, it's basically like that. So I really enjoyed the kind of idea of the isekai protagonist basically creating or taking over a nation to basically take over the world, something like that. Something like Overlord or Slime, or even, I guess those are the two main things. Or even Mao-sama, I guess, since that was the most recent one. And yeah, it's a really cool idea, and I really appreciated being involved in the story. But let's get on to the point of whether or not it deserves a second season. Well, let's see. I'm not really too hyped about it at this point. Like, I can understand the appeal, and I really did enjoy the series, but I don't know where it could go off from this, right? Obviously, it's going to go over the kind of elves and things like that, but I'm not as hyped for a season 2 as I was with something like Charlotte and things like that. So, would I want to see a season 2? I guess I could wait for it. Maybe, you know, it's been out for a bit, so I guess it should be time for a second season. And does it deserve it? I think it does. Honestly, there is a lot of faults with the series, I guess, but it is that kind of, it's a power fantasy in a different way than normal isekais are. The typical isekai power fantasy is like, oh, a bunch of magic, the main character getting all the girls and things like that, being really overpowered. But this is the power fantasy in the sense that the main character is very smart, and it makes the viewer feel smart for just watching, right? So it's a different kind of dynamic there. But will it get a season 2? That's kind of hard to say, because the studio who makes this anime is Madhouse, and they're pretty infamous for not making season 2s to really popular animes, right? We could see this with One Punch Man, right? One Punch Man was basically one of the most watched, most loved, or most popular animes of the 2000 or the of this, you know, decade, right? Everyone knows about One Punch Man. People who don't know about anime at least know about One Punch Man, right? It's just so popular and so iconic. But Madhouse had to basically do so many, had to get so many favors that they basically sold themselves just to make season 1 look so good as it was. So they didn't make a second season. I don't know why they choose not to do second seasons of a lot of animes. They basically like kind of like spread themselves out to try a bunch of different avenues, I guess. And they kind of forget about series like No Game No Life, even though No Game No Life is very popular and does have a lot of spin-offs, right? It has like I think 2 movies, I think, and a few OVAs. And yeah, that's basically it. So I would like to see a season 2. I'm not as hyped as I was for Charlotte, but I guess it could be there, right? If I were to give this a score, it'd probably be like maybe a 7.5. I think it is a little bit better than Shield Hero, but yeah. So this is really gonna be it. So this is gonna be the end of the video. So with that being said, yeah,